I believe everyone has a story to tell. And I believe everyone deserves a little pampering. Welcome to Mannies with Grannies. I'm your host, Tiffany Marino. Join me while I sit down with a woman over 70 and get to know her while giving her a manicure. Welcome to this episode of Mannies with Grannies. Today I'm back at the Sweets at Rouse and I'm with Marilyn. Marilyn, thank you so much for having me here today.
You're welcome.
So you live here with your husband, Ed.
That's right.
How did you and Ed first meet?
It was kind of a blind date.
Do you remember who set you up?
My sister-in-law. I was widowed. My husband died and I had gone to the cemetery. And after that, I always stopped at her house for a cup of coffee. While we were sitting there, coming from the cemetery, was this stranger. And he walked down the street and my sister-in-law said, "You ought to get to know him." And I said, "Who is he?" And she said, "Well, he lost his wife and he's always up at the cemetery too." So I didn't think anything more about it. And then I used to be involved with Warren Players, the little theater. And if you were involved, you always got a couple of free tickets. And I couldn't think of anybody to go with. So I picked the phone up and called him, told him who I was. And he said, "Oh, I remember you." We laughed about it afterwards because I said to him, "You lied. You lied. You'd had no idea who I was." So I met him in the parking lot of a grocery store. And I had a couple of tickets to the theater. So we were sitting in the theater. And this one I dearly love. It was amateur theater. And it was Romeo and Juliet. And if you've ever seen it, you know they have a long death scene. And I felt so apologetic because it was little theater and it was dragging out. And I leaned over and I said, "I'm really sorry it's taking them so long to die." And he looked over and he quietly said to me, "Do you think they'll be dead by 11? And that was how it all began. So from then we started going out. And we've been married how many years, Ed?
28.
28 years. And this is our second time around, so.
That's a sweet story.
Yeah.
I should note Ed is in the room with us too, so he's chiming in here. What was your wedding day like?
I'm trying to think. Did we get married in Frewsburg?
Yes.
At the church up there? We were both Methodists, so that worked out well. Did we go on a honeymoon?
Yeah.
Where'd we go?
Through the Panama Canal.
Oh, yeah.
Wow.
That was the beginning of our travels.
Have you done a lot of traveling together?
A lot. More than you can imagine. I even wrote them down. There were so many. I'll read them off to you. We've taken a circle driving tour of the USA. We've been to Hawaii 3 times. We've been to Alaska, Mexico, Egypt and Israel, Spain and Portugal, Italy, Germany. We've been on 3 or 4 Caribbean cruises. We've been to Hong Kong, China. We've sailed through the Panama Canal. We've been to Vietnam, England, France. We laughed. We had coffee at the top of the Rock of Gibraltar. We sailed across the Atlantic from England to New York City. So it's been quite a nice adventure.
That is some impressive travel. How old were you when you and Ed got married?
Do you remember, Ed?
62 and 68.
Yeah.
Oh, I saw a sign outside your door. It said, Ed and Marilyn established 1995. Is that the year you got married, 95?
Uh-huh.
So all of that travel was done pretty much post-retirement.
Yeah. I was 62 when we met. I was retired. And he was 68. Yeah.
Did you travel when you were younger as well?
A small amount. I used to be a travel agent.
Oh, okay. How did traveling when you were older compare to traveling when you were younger?
Well, we went to bed earlier at night. They were long days. No, they were wonderful days of travel. I wouldn't change a thing.
Do you have a favorite place you went?
Israel would be number 1 and Italy would be number 2.
What did you like about Israel?
Well, I grew up as a little girl in a Baptist church. Very strict. I think anybody who's a Christian would probably be very pleased to go to Israel. And I'd always heard about it, so away we went. And it was fabulous. It was a place like nothing ever seen before. The way they dressed, the men always wear black coats and black hats. And when the little boys are probably around 8, by then they've got a black coat and a black hat too. It's very much a man's world over there.
But you liked it when you visited?
Very much so. I'd go again if I weren't so old. But our traveling days are then. And sometimes it's best when you visit someplace to just keep the memories and try new spots.
What was your last trip?
Barcelona. I think that was the last one that I really remember that was... I mean, we still get around in the United States, but I think Barcelona was my very favorite. It was toward the end. We flew to Barcelona from Philadelphia, and then from there, we went to our hotel, and we spent several days in Barcelona. And it was so neat because we just get up in the morning and have our breakfast and leave and go adventuring for the day. And we never knew what we were going to see or do. And it's quite a fascinating city. So that would be, I think, one of my favorites. One of my sons was in the military and stationed in Germany. So I went several times to visit him. And my maiden name was Dietsch. And it doesn't get much more German than that. So that was part of the reason I wanted to go.
I'd like to talk about your younger years.
How much younger? By the time you get to be 90, everything is younger.
Is that how old you are, 90 years old?
91.
Mm-hmm. Where did you grow up?
In Warren. I was born here, and I grew up, went to school here, but shortly after I left, and I moved to Texas.
Did you graduate from high school here?
Yeah, 1950.
Why did you move to Texas?
I got married, and that's where he wanted to go. He had a job there. Away we went.
What was your first husband's name?
Jack.
How did you and Jack meet?
He came to work at the Pennsylvania Gas Company in Warren, and I was working there, so that's how we happened to meet.
Was that your first job out of high school?
Uh-huh, yes.
What did you do there?
Oh, I just worked in the office. They had a lot of office jobs.
How did it feel when you moved from Warren to Texas?
Exciting. Oh, I've always been an adventurer. Somebody said, "Do you want to go?" Yes. You don't have to ask me twice. So I have always been an adventurer.
Did you work in Texas?
I thought I was going to, but we got down there. And after about a month, I realized I was pregnant. So I never went to work down there.
How did it feel when you found out you were pregnant?
Not particularly excited. I thought I'd be married a lot longer. I thought I was too young to be a mother. I was in my early 20s, 23. I wasn't ready for a family yet.
How many kids did you have?
4. Had 4.
What are their names?
My daughter Carol was the oldest, and she died from cancer a few years ago. Then my oldest son would be Daniel. I remarried and had Daniel. And Daniel had a heart attack and died about 4 years ago. I still have a son, David. He was here when you were here. And then my youngest son is John. He lives in California.
How close in age was everyone?
They're all just a couple years apart.
Yeah, everyone was at home at the same time.
Oh, yes.
What was it like with 4 kids in the house?
A madhouse. And we always had a big boxer for a dog. They could take the punishment. Kids pushing and shoving and all that. So we felt the need to have a big dog. And I've always loved animals. I miss having a pet now that I've gotten older. When we moved here, we had 2 cats, and we left them at home, and my son lives in our house now, so he's taking care of the cats.
Is Ed your third marriage?
Yeah, I'm his second wife. He's my third husband. I'll have to tell you something funny. When I first started dating Ed, I thought I should be very honest with him. We were in the car and we were driving from Warren to Jamestown, and I remember it so well. And I said, Ed, there's something I should tell you. You won't be my first or my second husband. You'd be my third husband. And he never flinched, and he said, what'd they die from? I said, my cooking.
Did your first husband pass away, or did you get a divorce?
Got a divorce.
Can we talk about what happened?
Yeah. His mother. His father died. He was originally from Johnstown, Pennsylvania. Eventually we moved to Houston. And while we were down there, Papa died. His father died. And she came to visit, and she stayed and stayed and stayed. And after a couple of weeks, I said to him, when is your mother leaving? And he said, I don't know. And I said, she's got to go. This is not working out at all. And I said, well, you choose. Either your mother goes or I go. And he said, that's your choice. I said, okay, goodbye. And I left.
Did you continue not seeing him romantically, but a relationship with him?
No, nothing. It was just cut off cold. My daughter wanted to meet her father a couple years ago, and he was back living in his hometown of Johnstown, and she went down to see him. And that satisfied her. She didn't care if she ever went back again.
How did you meet your second husband?
I'd known him since I was about 18, so.
When you left Jack, did you move back to Pennsylvania? Mm-hmm. Back to Warren?
Yeah.
Did you move back in with your parents?
Mm-hmm, I did.
How'd that work out for you?
I had the nicest mother and father anybody could ever ask for.
I want to hear more about them. Tell me more about your mom.
Oh, my mother was this sweet lady of Swedish heritage, and her name was Ellen Seraphia Larsson Deitch. And I have some grandchildren, and one of them's name is Emily. My daughter named her Emily Seraphia, so she kept the name too.
Did your mom work?
She thought that she should. It was Depression time, and so many people didn't have a job. My dad did, but she decided to go to work. And in downtown Warren, we had a department store. It's no longer there. It's on Liberty and 2nd. It was called Metzger Wrights, and she worked there in the China department. And she would walk to work and walk back. She never drove a car. And she would walk to work and walk back. She was independent and the sweetest lady you'll ever find.
What was your father like?
My father was a big, strong German, and he loved the outdoors. We always had hunting dogs, and he would come home from work in nice weather, and he'd change his clothes, and away he'd go, and he'd take the dogs over to Pleasant Township. And there probably were 15 houses in Pleasant Township at the time. It was just no man's land. And he would take his dogs over there and let them run. And he was kind, he was sweet, he was gentle, and he laughed a lot. He and my mother had a beautiful marriage together.
Did you have brothers and sisters?
I had one sister, her name was Virginia. During World War II, she was working at Blair. At that time, they call it the New Process Company. And a friend of hers said, Virginia, I wish you would write. There's this guy, his name is Tom, and he doesn't hear anything from his family at home. So she started writing to him. So when World War II was over, he came to Pennsylvania to meet the girl that had written him all those letters. And they got married and had 3 children. So that they lived in Warren, and she was the only sister I had. And I never had a brother. It was just the 2 of us.
Is she still with us?
No, she's gone. She was older than me, and I'm 90.
How does it feel to be 90?
Not much different than when I was 70. I don't feel old yet. I know I'm slower doing things. It takes me longer to do this and that. But it's just the aging process.
Did your family always have electricity?
Mm-hmm. Yes, they did.
How about a car?
Yep, as long as I can remember, my dad had a car.
Oh, and you said that your dad worked through the Depression. What did he do?
There was a place in Warren called the Pennsylvania Furnace and Iron. I don't remember. What is it now, Ed? Is it something?
It's gone.
It's gone.
What were you like as a teenager?
Kind of wild and crazy.
What kind of stuff did you get into?
Everything I could.
Did you get in trouble?
No, not with the law or anything like that. No.
What's the most trouble you got in with your parents?
I'd never come home on time. And I had a lot of boyfriends over the years. And I can remember they would walk you home. You stand on the front porch, you know. And when my mother thought it was time, she'd turn the light on. And then he'd have to say goodnight and go home.
Did you and Virginia always get along?
Yeah, but we were 9 years apart. So we really had nothing in common until we were both in our 30s and early 40s and through there.
What was it like living through World War II?
I was just a teenager. It didn't affect me at all.
Are there any big historic moments that stand out in your mind that you remember living through?
Mm-hmm. I'm trying to think. I believe I was 12 years old, and it was December 7th, and we were having a birthday party, and all my little friends were in the dining room, and the door opened in the kitchen, and my aunt and uncle walked in. They just lived a block away. And they were having a lot of conversation with my parents. And I, being a kid, I couldn't figure out why they weren't paying more attention to my birthday party. And the Japanese had just bombed Pearl Harbor, December the 7th. So that's how I remember that one.
You said one of your sons was in the military?
When we lived in Ohio, my son John was in the Air National Guard. And he came home from school one day and he said, well, I've made up my mind. I said, what? He said, I'm going in the Air Force. And I said, why? And he said, well, for one thing, they'll pay my way through college. I said, okay, where do I sign? And he just went away, and he's a retired lieutenant colonel. So he stayed in the military.
When you came back to Warren after living in Texas, did you get a job in town?
Mm-hmm, I did.
What were you doing then?
We had a newspaper called the Warren Times, and then the other one was the Observer. And now they've combined the papers. But I went to work for the Observer, and I sold advertising.
Did you like doing that?
Oh, yeah. I've always been talk. Ask Ed.
You said earlier that you worked as a travel agent.
I did. Uh-huh.
How did that come about?
Well, I was living in Ohio, and a friend of mine said, you ought to give it a try. I think you'd be good at it. So I did. I went because I had done a lot of traveling. So I did that in Ohio. I was in a travel agency. Loved it. Loved every minute of it. When I started going here and there, it was like, oh, this is what I've been waiting for all my life.
When did you move to Ohio?
Oh, my goodness. I'm trying to think.
You graduated high school, then you met Jack and moved to Texas.
Yeah, and then I moved back again.
You came back to Warren.
Yeah. Jack and I were finished, and I picked up with an old friend called Chuck. He and I got married, and we were married until he died. And then along came Ed.
Would you like to pick a nail color?
Mm-hmm. I thought about that or this.
Yeah, I like both of them.
Is this purple?
It's more like a gold. It's like a rose gold.
I'll take that one.
It's pretty.
I like some color, but not overwhelming.
This is pretty. It'll look pretty with the top you have on, too. Was Chuck sick?
Yes. He had diabetes.
Is that what he died from?
Mm-hmm. Eventually he died. He was 58.
That seems so young.
It was. It'll do that to you. Oh, I like that.
Great.
I like that a lot.
Oh, good. How did you get through the loss of your husband?
Not easy. But the children were all grown. So.
How did you and Ed decide to move to the suites at Rouse?
I was out in the kitchen one day cooking, and I said to Ed, I've cooked for so many years, I'm tired of it. And so we came down here and been in this unit ever since. I can't say enough good things about it. It's a wonderful place to be. The food is nice.
It beats cooking for yourself.
Definitely beats cooking for myself.
And you said that your mom had lived here, but at a different part of the Rouse.
Mm-hmm.
So you were already familiar with it?
Yeah. My dad died, and she lost her memory, and my sister thought this was a good place for her, so she made arrangements. She could not function without him. He'd always been the strong man in her life. Being alone was more than she could handle.
What's something important that you learned from your parents?
Best thing in the world is to love your husband and have him love you back. A happy marriage.
How are you a good partner in your marriage?
Well, we talk nicely to each other, and we try not to criticize. And another thing that I think, it just happened, but I think when people get married, they would be best marrying someone of their same faith, Protestants and Protestants. I think that's better.
Why do you think that?
Well, I think religion is an important part of anybody's life. And if you're of the same religious faith, you have a lot more in common.
What do you want young people to know about getting older?
Takes a lot of patience, and don't expect perfection. Oh, Ed, you should see how beautiful these are.
What's a good piece of advice you've gotten?
Be honest. And if you love someone, tell them, show them.
You go by Marilyn, but that's not your given first name, right?
No, I'm Jean Marilyn.
Jean Marilyn. Why don't you go by Jean?
Well, my mother wanted to name me Marilyn. My dad wanted to name me Jean. So she was smart. She let him have his own way. So the birth certificate says Jean Marilyn. He seemed to think that was good. She always called me Marilyn, and when I went to school, I always went by Marilyn, so I've always used that. But if you look under, here at the Rouse, I'm probably registered as Jean.
Do you remember how you chose your kids' names?
Oh, my goodness, yes. When I was young, I had a friend. She originally was from Erie, and when I lived in Texas, turned out she had a house about 2 blocks away from me. I always thought she was so pretty and kind and nice. Her name was Carol. And that's how my daughter got her name. But I put Carol with an E on because it was Christmas time and I thought of Christmas carols. Daniel, I named him. I knew a very handsome man who worked for the Pennsylvania Gas Company, and his name was Daniel. And I thought, that's a good one for me. And then by the time I got to David, I was kind of running out of some names, but my husband had an uncle, so he got to be David. And John, my son, was named after his grandpa, my dad, John.
Tell them about the tourism director, Aaron Warren, when you came back.
Yeah, I was Warren's first full-time director of tourism.
Wow.
Yeah. Oh, there was nobody else. It was a job that was created. So now it's big time.
That's very cool. You started it all.
Mm-hmm. I did.
Is there anything else that you'd like to talk about?
The thing I really get a big smile about, there's an actress, I don't know if she's still alive or not, but her name was Bette Midler, and she coined a phrase, and it said, getting old is not for sissies. And I have adopted that. So getting old is not for sissies.
That's great. Marilyn, thank you so much for talking to me today. This was great getting to know you.
Well, I've enjoyed the time we had too.
Thank you for listening to Mannies with Grannies. I hope you enjoyed learning about someone else and maybe even learned a little about yourself.